We were just having a discussion about Von Miller. I think that the Bills should save him for a little bit longer. Do those discussions go on behind the scenes, or as soon as a guy is healthy, do you get him back on the field immediately?
Oh no, Maggie, they're ongoing. I mean, you're having that discussion, and I know they talked about this back in training camp, whether or not to try to get him ready for opening day, and then from that point on, once they made the decision to put him on, I think IR, it's been a conversation about when do we bring him back. So that's an ongoing conversation, and I'm sure they've talked about it throughout this week as well.
Coach, does playing in London affect a decision like that? I mean, it's a long flight, a lot happens, and it can be a weird field. I think this one's in Tottenham. Do you approach those games differently when you think about who's going to play and how you're going to play guys?
Well, when you're coming off the type of injury that Von had, you do have that discussion. Maybe some other injuries, maybe not. But in this case, you for sure have that discussion. As you mentioned, long flight. You're concerned about any swelling that might occur. If there is any type of setback because of the game, what might happen on the way back from the trip. So, yeah, you're having those discussions, and it does factor into whether or not you play him or not. It factors in.
Leslie Frazier is our guest. We're talking about the Bills because he was most recently the defensive coordinator for the Bills. Of course, he's a Super Bowl champion, 85 Bears, legendary. Coach, I'm curious, you stepped away before the season started. Are you still in communication with the Bills? Are you talking to any of the players? Are you consulting? Or is there any communication whatsoever?
I'll get calls from some of the players and some of the coaches. As a matter of fact, I was on the phone. I'll share this with you, Maggie. I don't think he would mind. Tre'Davious had a very serious injury a few days ago, and he called me, and we talked in great depth and just trying to lift his spirits, and it was a hard conversation because he's gone through so much, coming back from the ACL, and now the Achilles. It was just heartbreaking, and it just broke my heart just as we were just discussing, how his mindset has to change now, how he has to work hard again, get back to the player that he was. He really felt like, Coach, I've turned the corner. I'm on my way back. He texted me after he got the interception against Washington, and he said, did I remind you of you with this interception? And it brought a smile on my face, and so just breaks my heart, Maggie. But he's such a hard worker. I know if anybody can come back from an ACL and a torn Achilles, it would be Tre'Davious.
Man, the guy was an all-pro, such a great draft pick for the Bills. But, he's been through a lot. You mentioned the ACL. I know he was super affected, as all of you were, I'm sure, by the scary scene with DeMar Hamlin. And then now to tear the Achilles. I mean, how do you make up for that loss of production?
Oh, it's not going to be easy. I mean, some other guys are going to have to step up, and that's why, Brandon and Sean, they've done a really good job of creating depth on the team, and now you're going to have to count on your depth in the secondary. Some of the other guys are going to have to step up. You count on Christian Benford to step up, and I think he will. Kyer Elam will get a chance to get back on the field. Dane Jackson will get a chance. So those next man up. I mean, that's the mantra in the NFL, and hopefully each one of those guys will, when they get their turn, will step up and play well.
Okay, last Bills question, because Perloff has 100 questions he wants to ask you as well. But because you were most recently the defensive coordinator for the Bills, did such a great job with that defense. I mean, Coach, as a longtime Bills fan, obviously, I only want to see them win a Super Bowl, right? My whole life, from my family, everything. How much pressure is in that building? Because you guys have gotten, close. You've been dancing around it since Josh Allen was drafted and really started to come on. How much pressure are those guys feeling in the building?
I don't know if it's pressure as much as it is, just that strong desire to get it done. I mean, there's no doubt the clock is ticking, but Josh, he's playing at such a high level that this, it's early, but man, it just feels like this just might be the year, Maggie. But it's always there, the pressure, because every team comes into training camp thinking they have a chance to win it. But when you're in the situation the Bills have been in, as you mentioned, you've been so close, just been knocking on the door. You just hope that this is the year, and it very well may be.
All right, Coach, I want to ask you about your former team as a player, the Chicago Bears. They play tonight. Justin Fields has struggled a little bit. Why has Chicago never been able to have a good quarterback? Is it possible it's the team and not the quarterbacks?
Yeah. There's a long history of not having a special guy in that role. But let me tell you, when we won the Super Bowl, Jim McMahon played at a very high level for us. And unfortunately, he dealt with injuries most of his career. But when he was healthy, he was the answer at quarterback. And I don't know if they really had anyone, as you mentioned, that could really, you could say that's the guy. Although I think Justin Fields is still early in his career. I don't know if it's time to write him off quite yet. You still got to let it play out a little bit more. But they have had trouble being able to find the answer at quarterback, and that's probably the reason they've only been able to achieve one Super Bowl.
Leslie Frazier is our guest. Few more minutes here. Super Bowl champion, of course, was a champion as assistant coach, too, was a head coach of the Minnesota Vikings, most recently the defensive coordinator for the Buffalo Bills. Coach, is Mahomes the toughest quarterback you've had to game plan against? I mean, you've gone against tons of Hall of Famers. Is it Mahomes slam dunk, or is there someone else out there that was tougher to game plan for?
Oh, Patrick will be right up there. I have to run through the Rolodex in my mind, but I don't know anybody much tougher because of, as you know, Maggie, and all the stuff he does off schedule. You have stuff taken away, and then he starts moving around and makes a play with his legs, and it just drives you crazy as a defensive coordinator. So I don't off the top of my head, I can't think of a guy much tougher just because of how smart he is, how accurate he is as a passer, and just his football IQ. And sometimes guys are extremely talented, but they don't really have a great feel for situations or the game itself. And Patrick's not like that. He's the full package, and there's a reason they've had so much success in such a short period of time under his guidance at quarterback. He's outstanding.
All right, Coach, last question from me. Maggie got in her Bills questions. I have to ask an Eagles question, another team that you were involved with. How would you deal with the brotherly shove or the tush push? Is there a way defenses can stop this, or is it just unstoppable?
Man, that's a good question. I've thought about that play a bunch of different times as I've seen the Eagles be so successful time and time again, and now other teams are copying that play around the league and trying to have success with it. Although we saw last week the Bears and the Broncos where they came up short in that situation. So, you're trying to get. I see teams trying to get better leverage than the Eagles' offensive line, but they've got a really good offensive line. It's not just the play itself. The push is hard, but the offensive line does a really good job. So I don't know if there's an answer quite yet, but people are going to continue to work and try to come up with one, and it's just a matter of time. But it's a tough play to defend. They've proven that.
Leslie Frazier, quickly, Coach, last one. You were former defensive back. Deion Sanders, former defensive back, does everything. If you, want to keep coaching, would you offer your services to Deion?
Oh, Deion knows I would do anything to help him. Maggie, when we were, doing everything on Zoom during the pandemic, I had Deion to come on and talk with our defense. Did it with Rob Woodson and Joe Gibbs, a lot of different people, Coach Ditka. And Deion, he told the guys, one of the coaches reminded me of this last year when he left and went to Colorado over the offseason. On the Zoom call with our players, he told them at that time, this was like 2020, I think it was, during the pandemic. And, I was just trying to be creative, coming up with ways to keep the guys' attention. And so Deion, he tells them, in about 2 or 3 years, guys, I'm going to be a Division I head coach. And at the time, he wasn't at Jackson State yet. He hadn't even gotten the Jackson State job. And so I'm listening to him talking. I'm going, man, Deion doesn't understand this coaching stuff, and how hard it is. And the next thing I know, he's the head coach at the University of Colorado after going from Jackson State. So, he knows how I feel about him. I have great respect for Deion and pulling for him and just hope they can keep it going and get it going again this weekend in their upcoming games.